Hi, this is Randy Erskine speaking, and this is episode 144 of the Athletes Podcast.
How long have you been playing for?
Professionally since 1972.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. When did you start playing golf?
I started when I was 13 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
13
Which is
years
late
old.
for some people, but I think it's good to start a little later in life because you have more strength and you have a little bit more knowledge where you can retain what you've been told is when you get lessons.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm super excited for this conversation, Randy. I want to first thank you for coming on the Athletes Podcast on short notice.
Sure.
Here at Great Oaks, behind us, incredible facility. Peter Gibb for putting this all together. But let's talk about that. 13 years old, you start off playing golf. Any other sports that you were playing at that age?
I played all sports. I was probably a better basketball player for a while when I started off as a golfer. And then I played football, and I pole vaulted and track, and those were the four sports I played quite often. But all of a sudden, something hit me in the summertime one time, and I just loved golf so much, probably because I made a couple pars or birdies, and that really propelled me into wanting to get better and better. And my father was a good golfer. He could shoot in the 70s and 60s. And he instilled upon me the value of lessons and practice. It's like any sport. Every sport requires muscle memory, and golf is certainly that way. So I continued to practice, and got pretty good. After 2 years, I could shoot in the low 70s, and every now and then I throw in a high 60s. So it came quick. But it only came quick because of the amount of time and effort I put into it.
So at 15 years old, you're shooting high 60s, low 70s.
Yeah, very high 60s. I think I only said 168 and the rest were 69s. And those were struggles to get to, but they were fun once they accomplished that.
So in 2 years, you're able to accomplish this. How much time did you spend over the course of those 2 years on the range playing?
Well, growing up in Michigan, we only had basically from May, June, July, August, September, October. So I didn't have many months to do it, but during those months, I put a great deal of time into it. From morning till night, I'd ride my bike to the golf course when I didn't have my license. And then after I had my license, I'd get there early. I'd play. I'd have lunch. I'd hit balls. And I had to pick up my own golf balls because the golf course I was at didn't have a range. So there was a field near inside the complex, and I would hit balls out into this one field and pick them up, hit them again, pick them up, hit them again, pick them up.
That's incentive to keep things straight.
Yeah, very much so. And I didn't want to lose any of them because golf was an expensive sport, and I really had to find my own golf balls to accomplish what I wanted to do and to go out and play golf. So I wanted to have a good golf ball, so I'd scour the golf course every time, every day or so, and find golf balls so I wouldn't have to buy any.
Incredible. Two-time All-American at Michigan. You win the Big Ten championship. Can you just explain what that was like?
Yes.
Representing your hometown almost, nearly?
It was close. It was only a little over an hour away. I grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan. And then fortunately, the golf coach at Michigan called me and wanted me to come to the schools, which I did. And I know that nobody back in the 60s could play any freshman sport. So if you were a football player, basketball player, whatever, you had to get grades first year. Then you could play only 3 years. Wow. So I only had 3 years eligibility, according to most people had 4 now. But my first year eligibility, I'll remember it, because you always remember your real bad things you've done and your good things. But this was a good and bad situation. I came to the last hole at Indiana University as a sophomore, and it was a par 5, and if I made a 4, I would win the Big Ten as a sophomore individual championship. And I hit a good drive right down the middle, and I was a bad bunker player at that time, and no one had given me real good instructions on bunker play. So in an effort not to go in the front bunkers, I made sure I hit enough club to go at least to the green or over, and I did happen to hit it fairly well, and it went over the green into a very bad lie, and I chunked it, knocked it on the green, and made 6 and finished 3rd, which was just devastating to me. But then as a senior, I did win it at Illinois, and won that by a couple strokes. So it was a good way to end my career at Michigan.
I can imagine it was probably a little bit of the ability to come back after that loss, and there's a little something to be said of.
Yeah, it meant a lot to me, and I really practiced hard that whole year getting ready for the Big Tens, and I knew I was prepared, and our weather was absolutely awful. It rained all 4 days with about a 20-mile-an-hour wind or more every day, and it was in the 40s and 50s. So just to get by those 4 days with the terrible weather we had was a task in itself. And I knew I was stronger mentally than everybody else. So I thought, and that won.
Clearly, if you spend every single day, every opportunity that you can on the golf course. I heard some stories about Oakland Hills Country Club. Obviously,
Yes.
just recently, unfortunately, burned down. But similar to Augusta, Pete was telling me some crazy stories there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think every person that starts golf wants to play in the U.S. Open. And that year, I was an alternate to get in. I had just missed the qualifier to get in. And there's only like 2 spots, and there's 100 and some guys playing, so it's not an easy qualifier. And then I got a call early in the morning, probably at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was PJ Boatwright. He was the head of the United States Golf Association. Said, Randy, we have a spot in the U.S. Open. Bob Tway has just withdrew because he has the flu. Can you make it? You have an 8:12 tee time. I said, I'll be there. Now, that's a good 50-minute drive from Ann Arbor, Michigan, into Birmingham, Michigan. Well, I made it, and I have no idea. I would never drive that fast again. That's just the fastest I've ever driven in my life. I went by every stoplight. I went by everything I could within reason. And I got there with about 3 minutes to spare. Never could hit a ball. Just got to the first tee, hit a great shot right down the middle of the fairway, knocked it on the green, and now it was an uphill putt. And I said, my gosh, I'm in the U.S. Open. What am I going to do? These greens look like they're really fast. So I putted, and it didn't get all the way up the hill, and it came right back at me. So I started off with a 3-putt and ended up missing the halfway cut by 2. And there was another person that missed the cut halfway by 2. His name was Jack Nicholas. So I didn't feel as bad missing the cut after I knew that Jack shot the same things I did. But it was a remarkable experience to play in the U.S. Open and in front of home crowd, too. We had great, great support that week. It was a fun day.
What an amazing story to be able to have. I can't even wrap my head around it. I get nervous showing up to a random course and not being able to hit a couple shots before I tee off. U.S. Open, were there nerves?
Yeah. There were some nerves, but I didn't have time to have too many. And I was ready to go, and I knew I could do okay if I just played up to my potential, which I really didn't, but it was still fine.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. You mentioned Jack Nicholas. Mm-hmm. You played with guys like Lee Trevino.
Yes.
I've heard a couple stories. What was that experience like? Because for you, they're peers.
Oh, definitely
but
peers,
for the majority of people, these are legends in the golf space.
Oh, yes.
Maybe some human stories that you have from those individuals or anyone in particular that stands out?
The first time I ever got to play Lee Trevino was in the Tucson Open, and I'd always heard what a great driver, how straight he drove the ball. And that day, out of the 14 holes where you can drive it, he missed one drive by maybe 3 inches. That's only because the fairway sloped to the left, and the ball just kicked left and just barely went into the rough. And he birdied that hole anyway, and he shot 66 that day. And I think I shot 71, and I was happy with 71, but he was probably unhappy with 66. But the man could move that golf ball around like no one I'd ever seen before, and I said, boy, is he in a different league. And the people that can move the ball around where they need to put it at certain times, they're the people that win all the big money. And they should win it because they can control their golf ball better than the average player.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the game, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that you weren't necessarily the best bunker player when you were playing in that tournament.
Yes.
What lessons did you learn afterwards? Maybe that our audience
I did get a great lesson from the bunker player from one of my teammates at the University of Michigan. His name is John Schroeder from La Jolla, California, and he had a great teacher called Paul Runyon. Okay. And Runyon taught him how to play bunker shots. And literally after a half hour in the bunker with John, I became a very good bunker player and actually would aim at bunkers if it was a par 5 in my later years. If the pin was cut in the front of the green and the bunker was in front, it was better for me to be in the bunker than just say off the side of the green. I loved the sand, and I still do.
That's turning your weaknesses into strengths, right?
Yes, and that's what you have to do.
Any other areas of your golf game that you maybe worked on at a young age and decided, hey, this is going to be turning that weakness into my strength outside of the bunker game?
Well, I was never a great driver of the golf ball back in my day when I needed to be. Now, it's probably the strongest point of my game. I seldom miss very many fairways in a whole day's time of golf. Back then, I would miss a few balls and miss the fairway, and that's really the reason I never became a consistent money winner where I would make a profit every year. I really only had 1 or 2 years where I made a small profit on the PGA Tour because there wasn't much money back then, and you had to do everything on your own. Travel, everything that you did, it was on your own and your own dime.
Let's talk about that, because that's not something that athletes are necessarily accustomed to nowadays. Young athletes are provided with a ton of opportunities, but golfers in specific still have a lot of work that they have to do on their own before they get to that money phase.
Oh, sure. The money phase is critical for some people. One little story about a man named Doug Toole. He ended up being a great golfer, won many tournaments on the tour. We were staying together one time to save dollars, and he was telling me he's only got a couple more weeks of money left, then he's going to have to leave the tour. And I said, Doug, I think I can help you. I know a guy that'll probably sponsor you. And I called that fella up. His name was Charlie Diamond. And Charlie Diamond said, Randy, on your say-so, I'll sponsor Doug. And that little impetus and money influence helped Doug become a great player and a multiple winner on the PGA Tour. So money helped him. He was, I just played golf with him, and I could see that he was far better than everybody I was playing with of my friends at that point. And it was helpful for me just to see that I could help somebody else too. That was fun.
Yeah, I mean, now I feel like you do that with what you're doing, providing these opportunities to travel around all over North America, frankly, to play in these incredible golf tournaments, these pro-ams that you're putting on.
Sure.
You mentioned you've got 100 plus players that attend these events?
Yeah, I have 3 of them coming up this year. I have 2 in Las Vegas in October, and both of them have 100 players in it. And then I have another one in San Diego, and that has just a little bit more than 100 players in it. And we play for money every day. Every day is a new tournament. The pros bring 4 of their amateurs from their club, and we have golf tournaments, and we play for money, and it's really fun.
What an incredible way to bring people together.
Oh, yes.
I love the sport of golf for that reason, because anyone can play it. And especially nowadays, we were talking about this earlier, but even the inclusivity aspect of golf, I'm sure you've seen the change over the past 3, 4, 5 decades in who's able to actually play. Can you maybe speak to what that transition has looked like for you?
Well, it's been great, and it all started with Tiger. Tiger Woods opened up golf to everybody, literally everybody that wants to play can play. There's avenues how you can even play without, well, like me, for example, I grew up with no range. I didn't have any money to go to a range and actually pay to hit balls. So people can do that. You can go to a county park, you can go to a schoolyard, you can do anything. If you have, let's say, 24 balls that are old and beat up, you can still get some practice for them.
It's his son actually just saw it 68 yesterday as well.
Yeah,
Not bad,
Charlie.
eh? Not bad.
He's going to be a very fine golfer, it appears, and he'll have every opportunity to do it. The key is, what's in his heart. How bad does he want it? And I think just being around his dad and seeing his dad's tenacity for golf, he'll do very well.
If you were to give Charlie advice from your perspective, knowing what you know now, as a young athlete, he's got the world as his oyster. What lessons would you give to him if you were to sit down with him for 5 minutes?
I would tell him to embrace golf and let golf be his friend and not his enemy, because so many kids get mad when they hit bad shots. And golf is not a game of great shots. It's a game of who misses it the best. So when Charlie hits those bad shots, and I didn't see any of that while watching him on TV when he and his dad won that tournament, that father-son tournament down in Orlando. I didn't see any of it, so I don't anticipate any, but all little kids go through a trial and error period where they get mad, throw clubs, curse, walk off. I don't think that'll happen to Charlie because his dad will not let him do that.
I think that's in every sport almost, though. Right? You know?
Literally every sport. Yeah, we all have that innate ability to get mad at ourselves, and I don't think that's good. It doesn't do anything but help the other person you're playing against to know that you're mad, because he said, well, he's going to fall apart here soon. And that's what normally happens when you get mad at yourself. You fall apart, and that's not good.
Yeah, absolutely. What strategies did you use to not get mad at yourself then?
It was all developed by my dad. He told me, if you're going to be your best, you have to be your best friend on the golf course. And I've always been my best friend.
Interesting.
Literally, that easy.
Self-talk, just, yeah.
Self-taught, yep. And knowing when the shot was bad, and then the first thought I always came into my mind is, I know I'll get this next one up and down and get my par anyway.
Okay, I have to ask, favorite round, best score, any like highlights? You mentioned you've got some highs and lows.
Yeah, I think the best score that I ever shot against the field on the PGA Tour was the second round of the Tournament Players Championship in Jacksonville, when we used to play across the street at a course called Sawgrass. The first day I'd shot 75 under perfect conditions, no wind, 78 degrees, and just ideal conditions, and I think I was in the 120th spot. The next day, a big storm came in. It was windy, it was cold, and rain, and I shot 67 on that round with a bogey on the last par 5, and I went 120 to 5th, and I've never experienced anything that before. And I can always remember the person you talked about, Trevino. He said, all right, Randy, which holes did you skip? Well, I didn't skip any, but I made everything that day. Everything was on: driver, irons, putting, and certainly it was a lot of fun, because all my sponsors who was helping me out financially, they were down there, and we just had a great time that evening.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad I asked that. When it comes to professional life, you played on the PGA Tour from 1974 to 1979, 5 years. What was that transition like from Michigan to the PGA Tour, time in between, from university golf to pro golf? What are those maybe 2 or 3 steps that an athlete needs to take to be able to get to that professional level?
I think the biggest thing they have to do is play in every tournament they can, as an amateur or as a pro. The more you play professional golf and win money, the more it entices you and gears you up for wanting to do better and better every time. So the more you play in tournaments for money and your own money, it really helps you. You know 2 things: you're going to get worse or you're going to get better. That's it.
And you're still doing that to this day. I think I was doing some research. You made like $2,500 this year already. Like you're winning tournaments.
Yeah, just in small events. At my age, I can't compete against the young kids anymore, the 25-year-olds. At 74, it's really easy for me to shoot my age. I think the last tournament I played in, our Michigan PGA senior tournament, I opened with 67 and 74 and won that one. So even at my age, it's still a great pleasure to win. And that's what happened after all those years of work. And still I work at it. It's still fun to practice.
Yeah, I never got to the point in my golf career where I was playing competitively for tons of money. But it's always fun playing with a group of guys, going out there, or gals, I should say, and putting a little money on the line and getting that competitive spirit going. Yeah,
that's what makes it fun. And then the presses that come about, and playing different golf courses with your friends. I love to take my friends to different golf courses, which I've done with Peter Gibb many times all across the country. So we have a good time together, and golf is about friendship, and that's what's so good about it.
Do you have a favorite course to play, favorite track?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to play Augusta National one time. That was my favorite by far.
Wow, okay. Particular hole?
No, all of them.
All of them? All 18?
Yes, every one.
I love that. Okay. I want to bring this back to Michigan. Your roommate, Rudy.
Yes. Well, Rudy wasn't my roommate. Okay. He was just a good friend at the University of Michigan.
Okay.
And as you know, Rudy became a 3-time All-American at the University of Michigan and was the second leading choice of the NBA that year. And when he got to Michigan, he didn't have a clue what a tee was or a ball was. And now we're both the same age, and we've played in some golf tournaments together as partners. And now he loves that sport more than anything. And he became a good golfer. He's shot in the 70s before now. And that just proves, golf is a sport that everybody loves once they get the feel of it and the desire to play more.
Pete and I were chatting about, Rudy, the stories, you guys going to the NBA Induction Hall of Fame last year.
Yes.
Any particular moments or experiences that you've gone through during those big events that stand out to you as far as like how these athletes come to be so incredible at anything that they do? Obviously, like you said, you were able to compete at basically basketball, golf, pole vault. Rudy seems to be able to do the same.
All good athletes seem to have great eye-hand coordination, and they understand the value of practice. The only way athletes become better players in whatever sport it is through muscle memory. If you have the muscle memory in baseball, hockey, whatever it is, you have to have some muscle memory about the function that you're going to do that moment. So in golf, you have to have muscle memory on many aspects of golf, from pitching, chipping, bunker play, putting, driving. Every one of them is slightly different.
The best part about golf, for me at least, was the ability to go out with my dad, play around at golf, have those memories with friends growing up. Now it takes up a lot of time in my day, 4+ hours. I went around rainy weather. I'm more of a fair weather golfer. You said you're still playing frequently now. I'm curious how you manage that in your day-to-day life so that you can still do other things. You're still playing tournaments on what seems like almost bi-weekly, monthly basis. Like, now playing tournaments is the only time that you said you really get competitive, those juices flowing.
Yeah. I've played so much in my life that just to go out and play golf, it's not as interesting to me as it was when I was young and I hadn't accomplished anything yet. I don't have anything more to accomplish. In my eyes, I've done way more than I thought I could ever do through practice. And it's just a fun event now. I love to go out and play and practice with my friends, and it's rewarding still.
So at 15, there were no aspirations of placing 5th in the Buick Invitational?
No. I'd won the Michigan Amateur when I just got out of college, Big Ten champion. I'd won almost everything else that I had played in, but I still had no ambition to think I could play on the PGA Tour, because I read these magazines called Golf World, and I'd see all these low scores these guys would shoot all the time from different schools, and I was never shooting those same scores. But what I didn't realize is their courses were easier under much better climate conditions than I'd play in a crappy 40 and 50 degree days in the Big Ten. I only had 4 tournaments at the University of Michigan I could play in during 1 year at a time. And if I qualified for the NCAAs individually, which I did a couple times, I got to play in 5. Now these kids play 5 in 5 weeks, and I would have loved to have done that, but that wasn't in existence back then.
What else would you have loved to have done looking back at the age of 74 now? Would you have pursued basketball, pole vaulting?
Basketball, no. My height didn't work. I actually built a basketball court in my basement. I had my basement dug real deep for the last house I built, and I had a 12.5-foot basement, and I put a 9.5-foot hoop, and boy, we had a ball with it, my boys and I and all my friends. So that's how much I liked basketball. And then you talk about Rudy Tomjanovich. He did the opposite. He lives on a golf course now, and that's all he can do is play golf. And so everybody wants to do something that they didn't really get a chance to do, but nothing can compare to how good golf is, because remember, 13 I started, and now I'm 74. All those years in between were great years.
Yeah, and you even said now the fact that it's easy to shoot your age or below it.
Oh, yes.
Not something that I'm capable of doing or will ever be, frankly, likely. But when was the first time that you shot your age?
I did it at 64. I was playing with a bunch of my members from Great Oaks Country Club. We had 2 groups. We were just having a little outing. And my golf pro, who I grew up under at the Battle Creek Country Club, came out to the golf course, and I had 4 holes to go. He said, "How many under are you?" I said, "Well, I'm so many under." He said, if you birdie these last 4 holes, you could shoot your age. I thought, well, that would be great. And I did. I birdied them all and shot 64, and that was the first time I'd shot my age at that time. I didn't break it, but even to just shoot your age at 64 was fun. And a lot of people that I know, my friends, they've all done the same thing.
That's impressive to say the least. You didn't get you nervous? No superstitions there?
No, I had about a 6-footer the last hole for my for my birdie that I had to make, and it went right in the middle. So that was really fun.
Never a doubt, eh?
No, never a doubt. And my members beat me that day out of money because they had a higher handicap than I did.
Sandbaggers.
Well, they just played better than I did, maybe.
So you also played in the Andy Williams Open, Torrey Pines. On every tee box, Pete said you had a new story. Do you want to share any of those stories today with the Athletes Podcast listeners?
The only thing I can think about that I really can relate that's A-rated is playing with Roger Maltby, who is one of the great announcers on the tour now. It was the second round we were playing together. On the first hole at Torrey Pines, it's really a brutal par 4, and it was uphill, into the wind, cold, and we both hit good drives, and we had hit 3 woods into this par 4 for our second shots. And Roger Maltby, and I've told him this before, hit the most gorgeous 3-wood I'll ever see in my entire life. High, just beautiful, staying in the blue sky, and just dropped it right next to the hole. I said, that's the best 3-wood I've ever seen in my life. That's what I remember about Torrey Pines more than anything else, because Torrey Pines was always never in great shape. It was always wet. It was always cold. But that shot, I'll never lose it out of my memory.
Do you feel like you had an advantage playing in those conditions as a pro growing up here in Michigan?
I do, because we'd have bad weather there, and growing up in Michigan, I learned how to play in cold weather and rain and wind. And that's when you're a so-called rookie on the tour, your goals are different. Like my goal was always to make the top 25 players after the 4 days of competition. And that would get me into the tournament next year automatically. So top 25s were important. Okay. And I think that was my first good top 25 was at the Andy Williams San Diego Open.
Wow.
So that was fun.
Top 25 obviously is an incredible feat that people will never experience unless they're at the top level of golf sport. Sure. When you think of over the past 49 years of golf that you've experienced, when you come into these new opportunities to come out on Grand Oaks, where you were a pro for 25 years?
Yes,
am I right?
25, yes.
And current record holder. No big deal. Does it just come out here when you play with buddies? Does it just come naturally to you to come out, compete, and be the best that you can be? Or do you have to dig deep to be able to get that competitive
I still
pace?
think you have to dig deep a little bit, but I don't try very hard. Historically, my entire life, I've always played better in tournaments than I have just casual golf. Casual golf, I'm a par or just a little under par shooter, but when the tournament started, I always came to the top easier than most.
Okay. Anyone you really loved playing with?
Oh gosh, Arnold Palmer.
Okay.
Yeah, he was my idol, and it was really fun playing with him. We played in a twosome at the Houston Open. Houston Open one year, and he finished with the last 5 holes. He birdied 4 of the last 5 holes. It was just incredible. The last hole was unique because we both hit good drives down the fairway, and he hit an awful iron shot, semi-sculled at the back of the green. He's got over a 50-foot putt. I hit it in there about 8 feet. And the range paralleled the 18th hole, and everybody was watching Tom Watson hit golf balls, and I could see the entire range go whoosh, right over to the 18th green to watch the king finish. And he made that putt, and the noise was deafening. I'd never heard any noise like that in golf before in my whole life. And hair in my arms stood up. It was just a great, great, great thrill.
Did you make your putt?
I did not.
Oh.
I did not, no.
You bring up Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
I was reading the book Players. Are you familiar with it?
I don't think I am.
Okay.
No.
And it talks about the financials that were involved specifically for Arnold, having the contract negotiations.
Right.
McCormack, I feel like the name comes.
Mark McCormack.
Yes. Crazy stories. I highly recommend for people who are interested to go read that book. But financials have been at the forefront of golf recently because of the LIV Tour.
Correct.
I'm curious to hear from your perspective your thoughts on it.
Well, I don't know a great deal about the LIV Tour, as most people in America don't know much about it, because it doesn't receive any any sort of media coverage. It doesn't get anything on radio, television, print, nothing. You don't hear anything about it. And I don't know if it's going to get a great deal of coverage over on, different parts of the world. I don't blame any of those people for taking those multiple $million contracts. I don't blame them one bit, because they did it for their family. They thought it was going to be good for them. The only thought I have where it might be a negative thought is these people putting all this money up. I don't care how much money a person has. They don't want to continually pour money into something that's not going to be a success. Right. So at the end of, let's say, 2 or 3 years, they can see they still don't have TV contracts. They don't have other contracts with other people to help offset expenses. I can see it possibly folding. And then those people that left the tour, the only way they're going to get back on, from what I understand now, is they're going to have to go through qualifying school. And you're not going to have many people 49 years old beat these 23-year-olds at golf anymore. It won't happen. So now they're going to be left high and dry. And I don't think they'll be able to play on the Champions Tour either unless there's new rules to come about. That's the only thing I can see negative.
Interesting. Chris McClure, who we had on the show a couple weeks ago, mentioned he's got a bunch of amateur golfers playing in the NCAA who he's coaching. And he said it just opened a whole new book of opportunities for these collegiate players.
Yes.
To make significant life-changing money right out of school.
Yes.
What would that have been like for you?
Oh, it would have been phenomenal. I would consider myself really an also-ran back, and then even though I'd won a nice tournament, the people from the South had a big advantage over the people from the North because they just got to play all the time. I only had a few months that I could work on my craft. But nowadays, with the amount of money that they're getting is incredible. I mean, if I was to make the same amount of money, if I finished the same amount I did on tour, I'd be a multimillionaire. Back then, I was barely making a profit or losing every year. That's a big difference.
How did you manage that? Like, that's got to be stressful.
Well, it wasn't too stressful for me. I had good sponsors. They put the money up. They enjoyed golf. They were all golfers. It was stressless. Because I knew I had the money behind me to do it, and I would win money continually. I just wouldn't win the big dollars. I didn't make $15,000 or $20,000 a week. A good week, I'd make $2,000 or $3,000, and that paid for a lot of things. But it was a lot less expensive back then. Yeah,
and I've heard you're a Callaway guy through and through.
I've been with Callaway almost 30 years now. It's a great company, and they support golf immensely. They have grown so much. I think they're the biggest golf company in America.
And they produce some of the best equipment as well.
They do. They produce the best equipment for the tour pros, the everyday golfer, kids, ladies, anybody, seniors. They have products for everybody.
Randy, I can't thank you enough for coming on the Athletes Podcast today, taking time out of your day. You probably would have been out there practicing knowing
Not likely, Dave. No, not likely today. It's ugly out there. It's cold.
It is. But, Hey, you've obviously been able to practice no matter what the conditions were and receive some incredible honors. I'm honored to be able to feature you on the show today. The way we wrap up every episode is we ask our guest what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes. Now, you were inducted into the University Michigan Athletic Hall of Honor in 1989.
Right.
And the Michigan Golf Hall of Fame in 1991. I'd love for you to share what your biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation.
Again, we spoke about it earlier. It's just dedication and practice. The more you dedicate yourself to your craft, the better you're going to be. And you've got to understand, you've got to do it mentally as well as physically. If you're not your best friend on the golf course, you will not succeed.
Just be your best friend on the golf course. That's it. That's the episode. Randy Erskine, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Dave. You bet. My pleasure.
Appreciate it.